This is the Unscripted Climb, the podcast where business owners talk about stuff that doesn't make it to motivational speeches. I'm Chris Beecham, founder of Perch merch, where we put your logo on things people might actually keep. I co-host this with Natalie McCauley, founder of Oh Hello Agency. She makes brands look like they have their act together. If you want a free merch or brand audit, we do that too. No pressure. Just don't blame us if we're honest. Go to theunscriptedclimb.com. Let's get going. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Unscripted Climb. I'm your host, Chris Beecham, joined by Natalie McCauley. So today we're going to talk, apparently, me.
It's all about you today, Chris.
Yeah. So let's go, I guess.
This will be episode number 1 if you're listening to the Unscripted Climb. And I first just want to open with, we started this podcast together maybe 3, 4, 5 months ago. We came up with the idea. And the reason why we wanted to start it is because Chris and I talk on a daily or, at least weekly basis about all of the highs and lows of being an entrepreneur. And it's a really hard journey to go on. It stretches you. And what we don't see out there, even with the thousands of pieces of content going out, is enough people actually peeling back the how and what the highs and lows look like and how to get through them. We see a lot of people standing in front of cars on Instagram, like a Tesla, and being like, make $20,000 a month. But that's not real. I mean, a lot of it is not real. So today's first episode, we're going to share Chris's story. And I'm going to interview him, and he's going to get vulnerable and real about where he's been as an entrepreneur, where he's going. And my hope for you guys as the audience is that you get to see, because we're going to do this for me on episode 2, that we're willing to actually share. And this will encourage you to continue following along on our journey as we interview other entrepreneurs and open up their stories. So welcome, Chris, to the Unscripted Climb. My first question for you is, how did you first become an entrepreneur?
I was there's that saying that, for all those C students in high school who really didn't, care or pay attention or, any of that, how's entrepreneurship going? How's owning your own business going? Because I feel like that was just me in high school. I didn't care about school. I just was more into the social thing than anything. But I always wanted to be a real estate agent, believe it or not, since I was probably 12 years old. That was my plan, was to be a real estate agent. And so when I was 18 years old and got out of high school, I'm like, all right, I'd just become a real estate agent, So I went to the real estate firms here, and I was like, I'm here, tell me what to do. And they're like, well, first, you're an 18-year-old kid, and nobody wants to buy a big investment from an 18-year-old, so you probably want to rethink that. And I was like, okay, well, I already went to real estate school. I did the 6-week course and everything. So I said, okay. So I went around to apartment complexes, and I was like, can I lease apartments? Because I think one of the brokers told me, start by leasing apartment complexes. I did, and I loved it. And I love just meeting new people. And I think that's just kind of where everything stems from, is just meeting new people all the time and building relationships. And I was really good at it. And so then eventually I became a real estate agent. And again,
when you say eventually, hold on, you're 18, you're told no. What do you do with that no?
I went and became a leasing agent and started running apartment complexes.
Okay, how long did you do that before you went back into real estate?
6 years.
Did you enjoy that?
I loved it.
You did?
Yeah. I loved the leasing part of it. I hated the management part of it.
Well, yeah, because you're managing people.
Yeah, that was the no fun part. But then I eventually became a real estate agent in 2004, and that was spectacular. I was newcomer of the year, loved my life, and then 2008 happened, and that was the crash. And all of a sudden, it went from life was good to uh-oh.
How old were you in 2008?
29.
Okay, so you're, 6 years into your career? How many years are you into your career as a real estate agent?
About 5 years into the real estate, 4 to 5 years.
And it's good. You're making connections, You're selling homes, you're cruising.
And then the market crashed. So I said, okay, what's my next step? I have made a lot of money, and I have a lot of money. So I was working out at a gym, and I just lost a 6-month fitness challenge where I lost 60 pounds, because being a real estate agent, all you do is kind of sit around and eat and stuff. So I had become a bigger guy. And the gym that I was working out at, I just watched deteriorate from when it was busy the first month. By the 6th month, they weren't giving anybody towels anymore. The place was just dirty. It was falling apart. And I'm like, but I love this place, and I don't understand what's happening. And I knew the owner, because he'd kind of wander around and people would be like, that's the owner. So I just walked up to him and I said, "Hey, you want to sell me the place?"
That's bold.
And he said, "Yeah, let's do that." And I said, "Okay." I was like, "Can we set up a meeting?" And so we set up a meeting and we went to the bar area there. And I remember, this sounds really horrible and dumb right now, but he wrote out all of his income and expenses on a napkin. And he said, these are kind of our books, and this is how much you'll make, and I'll do this, this, and this for you. And I was like, sold. Me or Jim at one point in time. I can tell you that.
Yeah, well, when they stopped handing out towels, it clearly wasn't right.
Yes. No. That was like the first thing I did was like bring back towels and everything. And
so you don't go get a third-party valuation. You don't get a business broker. You don't go to a bank and check these numbers. You go, that sounds good. And then what happens? Like, are you getting a lawyer involved to drop these papers? Like, what was the process?
Yes. Yeah, we did actually go the legit way. I just never looked into the actual financials deeper.
Which might have been a problem.
Yes. It turns out it was kind of a problem.
Oh,
well, so
dear.
I realized very quickly, like I doubled membership within the first 30 days.
Just through
And-
sales.
Yep. Just through sales. And I was the guy who was selling the memberships, just like Alex Hermosi,
We love you, Alex.
You walked in and I was going to sell you that membership, and then about a month goes by and I threw, everybody gets towels, I'm repainting everything, new lockers, everything's going great. And an air conditioner goes out. So I'm like, man, air conditioner went out. So call the air conditioner guy and he's like, well, it's a $30,000 air conditioner. And I was like, oh, crud. All right. Well, here's $30,000.
And you need air conditioning in a gym. You can't shortchange on that,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. And then it was probably about 3 weeks later, the pool ceiling fell in. And they're like, well, that's $80,000. I was like, oh, okay. And
Oh, my
got
God.
that fixed. And then it was like a month later, the roof just, again, caved in a different spot. And all of a sudden you go from, everything's good to you are
Hemorrhaging money.
just the building, which was a very old building that had been neglected for years. And that was the problem.
So basically, because you hadn't had a due diligence check on what exactly am I buying, where am I moving into, what are all the additional costs, you got stuck with over $100,000 in additional fees.
Correct.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. What'd you do?
Well, I realized very quickly that I was going to be in trouble because even the amount of memberships I was selling, like there's only so many people that can fit in the gym. And it wasn't like a cheap membership, like Anytime Fitness where you pay your $10 and you hope they don't show up. The best client is somebody who didn't show up. Don't
Correct.
get me wrong. That's
yes.
always
in the
best
gym
client.
industry.
Like,
Even for personal training,
yeah, there was people that would show up just to shower and go in the steam room in the mornings. And I was like, you're wasting my water. But I realized very quickly that it just kept happening and just kept happening. And I was like, uh-oh, it didn't matter what I did, that I wasn't going to win.
Yeah, you knew you were in over your head. There was a lot of costs unaccounted for. And
And-
I'm assuming you were also... So you get to the point where you're like, I'm hemorrhaging money, and you probably barely had any money yourself at this point.
No, I was broke.
Yeah,
I had borrowed from anybody I could.
Yeah, we've all been there.
And so basically filed bankruptcy. And what I did was we ended up going back to the guy who sold it to me and basically threatening to
Legal.
sue him for fraud or have him, which he ended up going to jail for fraud for the next
dear.
person, but not for me. But
I'm sorry.
so, but you go through that whole, you lose everything. And then on top of that, I'm getting a divorce mainly because of it, and my family has disowned me. So I always say, you want to know who your true friends are, go through a bankruptcy and a divorce at the same time. And because it turns out I didn't have any friends, like
Oh, yeah.
real ones. Everybody was gone, which was fine because when you publicly go under like that, you don't want to go out. You don't,
You're good.
Even if somebody asked me to go out, I didn't have any money. So I spent the next 6 months painting apartments and selling plasma.
I've done that in college. I wanted Abercrombie and Fitch jeans.
Because I would have my kids every other week and I couldn't feed them. So I would sell plasma. And then I, would go get some chicken nuggets, and a frozen pizza. And we'd have the same thing. My kids will talk about it now. It's like, we had the same thing every time we were at your house. I'm like, hey, listen,
Hysterical.
it was what I knew I could afford with my $30 that I got from the plasma.
At this point?
Even just because you file bankruptcy doesn't mean everything's good. still.
It's like just hitting the restart button. And
It
you have
is,
to
but it still
rebuild your
takes-
credit.
Well, yeah. Well, the whole thing, like I remember going home to my 1-bedroom apartment and the electricity was off.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, no, like, damn it. I swear I paid that bill. It was only like $50. It's just a little apartment. And so I call, the electrical company and they're like, well, you owe us $50,000. And I said, no, that was my business. I'm filing bankruptcy. They're like, you had a personal guarantee. Therefore, it transfers to you. And I was like, well, I don't have $50,000. And they're like, well, you don't have electricity.
Oh, my God.
And I was like, oh.
What did you do?
Well, long story short, I found somebody else to put my electrical name in.
Yeah, you had to. You had to be like, hello, could you put the electricity in your name? Or I'm not going to. Okay. So.
But then I remember then it was probably a couple weeks after that, I go home. I have the kids. It was like a Friday. I picked up the kids.
Yeah.
We parked and everything. And all of a sudden there's a knock on my door. And it's the repo guy. And he's saying, I'm here to get your truck.
Oh, my God.
And he's like, I'm letting you know if you want anything out of it, come get it. I already lifted it up, which I guess was nice of him because I had a lot of stuff in there.
It was very polite.
Yeah. So then, you got to call the ex-wife now and be like, listen, I got the kids, but I can't get them home. So like I said, I've been through it, so I get it, which is part of this podcast. And it's funny because I'm talking about this now and we've recorded like 10 episodes and we've kind of gone through other people's struggle. And at the same time, we're like, oh, come on, tell us more, like that's because we can connect. At the same time, like, well, if I'm asking other people to share,
You got to be willing to get vulnerable. And with a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old, no electricity, your truck being recalled by the depot, your friends not really around, your ex-wife's probably trying to get child support out of you. It's a lot of freaking pressure. And a lot of people would just honestly off themselves. Like, the truth is, a lot of people would just be like, you know what?
I have the thoughts.
I'm done.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, just disclaimer, we do not want anyone to commit suicide.
No.
But the reason I bring that up is because we have such a mental health crisis in this country as it is. And I think part of the problem is people don't realize that, yes, you might hit rock bottom, but there is always 110% a way to move forward. And so you as a person, what did you do during the worst period of your life to rebuild? What did it look like?
Worked my ass off.
Yeah.
Like, and I did, I knew how to paint. Not paint well, but I knew how to paint. And I knew, since I was in the apartment industry for so long, I knew a lot of apartment connections. And from real estate, I knew a lot of real estate. I was like, I'm just going to start a painting company because I know how much they make, and I know painters that live in $1 million houses, and I know that I can at least paint apartments. And so I did. I just started I started a painting company, and I just walked into apartment complexes every day. For the first 4 hours, I would just go from apartment complex to apartment complex asking to paint their apartments. And then I would spend the next 8 hours of a 12-hour day painting. No matter how late it went into the night, I would just do it. And
it's like therapeutic, though.
Oh, yeah. Well, it is and it's not, because when you're painting apartments, it's the same color on same color. So there's no thinking involved. So your mind starts going to also bad places if you let it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And you're just by yourself, and eventually I started hiring friends to help. And I kind of hit the jackpot, I'm not going to lie. I walked into an apartment complex one morning, and it was just a little 12-plex, but it looked like there was something happening there. And so I just walked up, and there was some guys there, and I said, I'm a painter. I'd like to, if you need a painter, I'd like to bid your apartments, and he said, yeah, I just bought this, and I'm going to renovate all of them, so let's walk through it. We walked through it, and he would say, how much to paint all 12 apartments, how much to paint all the ceilings? I'd be like, $5,000. He's like, cool. How much to paint all the walls? I'd be like, $6,000. He'd go, cool. He's like, let's go to the hallways. How much to paint all those hallways? I was like, $10,000. He's like, cool. And he's like, when can you start? And I said, tomorrow. And so I went, crap, okay, that's a big job. That's my first big job. And
because he just gave you, what, $50,000 worth of work right there?
It was like 30 or something, yeah.
Yeah, $30,000 worth of work. And you're like, so I need friends.
Yeah. And I couldn't even afford the paint because I remember asking, I was like, can I have a down payment for paint,
Yes.
And he said, no, but I'll buy the paint and we'll take it off the end and I'll pay you the day you're done. So I had motivation to get done, but it still took me all by myself like 2 weeks. In the meantime, like a week goes by and he comes walking in and he's like, hey, what are you doing? I was like, painting, He's
what
like,
you hired me to do.
Yeah. He's like, I just bought another apartment complex. It's a lot bigger than this. Let's go figure it out because I need to start remodeling that. Okay. So and he ended up buying like a 200 unit apartment complex and he was going to remodel every single one of them and just start kicking people out. I said, okay. And I was like, huh. And I just remembered like that was my Jerry Maguire moment, which, my wife hates it when I say that because people not our age have no idea what I'm talking about. But getting in that car, and all of a sudden like the weight, like just lifting off your shoulders and, you're just like singing with whatever song
Yes.
you can find on the radio. And you're like, I'm the king of the world. Like that was my moment.
Yeah. Because you knew you were coming out of it.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, and then all of a sudden, like that same week, he shows up again. He's like, hey, I bought another one. He goes, you either start hiring people or I'm going to find somebody else. So I was like, got it. So I went to my real estate office.
This guy liked you.
Yeah.
He liked you.
It was a perfect timing because he actually owned a big gas station chain and he had just sold it to Casey's.
Got it.
So he had $51 million that he needed to 1031
exchange. Oh.
So he has a lawyer that's calling old apartment complexes that look beaten up and just offering them left and right.
Yeah, because you don't want to pay taxes on that money. You're going to lose the money.
So that's why it's happening so fast. And he's on a mission because that's what his next thing is. And so I went to the real estate office because there was a crash, Real estate agents weren't selling any houses. Like, who wants to help me paint? You guys can make money. I know none of you are making money. And I had about 3 or 4 of them that were like, okay. And then the receptionist there was like, I'm going to quit and come work for him. Like, I was like, you don't get to do that. I'm going to do these guys. And she's like, no, I'm going to do it. I was like, you have benefits, an actual salary, And the next day I walked in, she's like, hey. I was like, yeah. She's like, I quit. And I'm like, no, listen, I just ruined a lot of people's lives, by going bankrupt. Like, I can't. She was a single mom of 3 kids. Like, I said, no, I don't want anything to do with this, Like, I didn't because that responsibility is horrible. And then when you fail at it, it's,
even worse.
Yeah, so that stays in your head. And she goes, I don't care. She goes, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. So here we are 16 years later, and Kathy still works for me.
Oh, you're going to make me cry.
Which is crazy. And I said this on another podcast, and she heard it. She was like, that was good. She's like, you're welcome, by the way. I'm like, all right, Kathy, it's great. No, she was my first employee, and she's still with me today. And that's how the whole thing, it just, blew up.
Where is Empire Painting today, and how has it scaled and evolved as you and your beautiful wife are both managing a lot of different businesses? So I'd love to know kind of where the journey went with Empire Painting.
I'd say Empire went great for about 10 years, and then I got too big, which does happen, I feel, and maybe it was too big, too fast.
And too much stress?
I was up to 35 guys, and we were doing massive commercial projects, and, I'm bringing in, the gross was $1.5 million for a painting company. Ain't bad because the profit margins are spectacular on a service-based industry. And what I've learned is when you have something like that, when the workers are working, you're making money. It's not like an office job where if you don't have any clients, they're still sitting there getting paid. That's what I do love about the service business. You think, if there's no painting left for the day, you go home, they clock out. They're not just sitting there twiddling their thumbs or pretending to, do something on the computer. Yeah. But I got 35 guys that's basically like running a daycare. I get in these one client that I basically decided to just go all in on. And in the meantime, just kind of blew everybody else off. This is my don't put all your eggs in one basket story.
Correct.
And I literally blew everybody else off because I was like, Why not just do these huge jobs, get paid a ton of money, and all the guys are at one job site, don't have to think about, I can go golfing, I can do whatever I want. It went smooth for the first 3 months. And then all of a sudden, we're not getting paid. And like 60 days goes by, we're not getting paid. And I start running out of money, and then here's 90 days, 120 days. But yet we're still on the project every day.
What was going on?
So, yeah. So find out that we were on 3 projects for this company, and none of the subs were getting paid.
Gosh.
And so we decided to walk off.
You have to.
Yeah, you have to. Because I begged and pleaded with them. I tell them, I was like, listen, I can't even afford paint anymore. Like, we are $250,000 down right now. Like, I can't live like that. And they were like, yeah, well, don't walk off. And we all walked off. So what I didn't know is that when you sign those contracts that you're not paying attention to, that if you walk off, even if it's for non-payment, not only do you not get paid, you have to pay for the next painter to come in and finish.
What?
That is correct.
How is this legal?
It is not.
That's
Well, it should
exploitive.
not be.
That's like Netflix documentary exploitive stuff.
And I've actually learned that a lot of these real big companies kind of do that on purpose.
Why?
Because then they get away with not having to pay a bunch of their subs. This particular one has been in the newspaper for it. The newspaper has done stories about how bad they have screwed people. Nobody cares. They're still in business. They're still doing it.
Why? Why? But why?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you. It's one of those things. I don't know how that man can be out in public, but he has a private jet. So there's that. So anyway, that all of a sudden you're starting over again, right?
Well, what? Well, hold on. So you walk off and you do. Okay, they call you. They said what? They call you and they're like, you're paying for the next painter to come in and finish the job?
Oh, yeah. So,
Did you
no,
have-
I got legal paperwork.
Yeah. So did you get into a lawsuit with them?
No, we ended up
Settling?
No, another long story short. Listen, I'm not dumb. That owner ends up asking me for a face-to-face meeting.
And you took it because you're a good person face to face.
Yeah. So instead of no attorneys, and so we sit down and he basically tells me he knows he's a piece of shit.
That's fun.
And he knows that he has screwed a lot of people over and he has a horrible name and nobody wants to work for him. And he said, but here's what happened. He's like, I got screwed by these, the domino
Somebody else
effect.
didn't trust Him. He didn't trust somebody. Yeah. Okay.
And so he's like, I need people like you, though, to rebuild up my brand, show everybody that we're good. And if you stick with me, I'll reward you. Can we start over? And basically, you get to overcharge me for everything to make up for it for the next. And,
Did you say okay?
I said, okay.
So you got back into it?
Got back into it.
Did he pay you?
Nope.
What?
He
Chris,
currently owes me money now.
this story is very sad for me right now. I was not expecting to feel this many emotions. Why didn't he pay you? What was the excuse?
It's a good question. I don't know. Right now, we're not talking. We're back to attorneys again. But that
What's the current amount owed?
For me, $55,000
Okay, so
plus whatever. I never got paid any of the $250,000 from.
so you're not even counting that at this point.
Nope.
You just hit the restart
Just hit the restart.
because you were happy that he wasn't going to make you pay for.
And it seemed actually like he seemed genuine. He seemed, And then when they started not paying, I was texting him and I was calling him. And then all of a sudden, we were supposed to do another job. And he said I could ask for a down payment at any point in time. And so I asked for a down payment. And then when I went to start the job, there was another painter there. And I said, what happened? And they said, we're not giving you a down payment. So I said, what's going on, man? Nothing. And all of a sudden I got a letter from his attorney for the painting from before. So
This is kind of, this is honestly horrifying. How long has this been going on for you? Since when?
2 years. 2 years.
So you're in the second year of it. So are you still building and scaling empire painting? I mean, you have one bad experience which can really shape the narrative in your head.
Yep.
But how do you get through that and continue building?
So that's another story. So we're going to talk business now.
Let's do it. I got my heavy weighted blanket on for this.
That ruined my motivation and drive.
I can't
The first
blame you.
one, not
Yeah.
this one, the first one.
Yeah.
And because I was lucky enough to own rental properties and a very nice house, and so I said, okay, so to make up for that $250,000, we had to get home equity lines of credit, which luckily we had a ton available. And so after paying off all the debt, just the minimum, and making sure all the guys were paid, I had extra money in that line of credit if I wanted. And I said, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I want to do something else. So we started looking for another business, me and my wife, and I came across Perch, which at the time was called something else, but it was a friend of ours and their wife and his wife and they make T-shirts, embroidered promotional products, and it's who I used for all of our businesses. And so I needed hoodies, so I went into the place because I learned they got divorced, and so I learned after they got divorced, if you called or emailed, nobody was responding to you. So you just had to walk in there and order stuff. So I walked in there.
Good customer service.
Yeah, I walked in there, walked into the back, and I said, hey, Matt, I said, I need some hoodies for Empire, and he said, ugh. And I said, what's the matter, buddy? And he said, this is a stack of people to call back. This is a stack of work that needs to be done. And I wasn't meant to ever own a business. And I said, wow. I said, then just sell it if it seems busy, He said, I would damn near give it away if somebody would just pay me to sit back here and make shirts. And this light just went off in my head because, like, how fun is it when you have a business and you get your merch, with your company logo on it.
So fun.
Nobody's mad at that guy.
So fun.
Like, that's fun. People who are working there, it's fun. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is what it just, from the second he said it, I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I don't want to paint anymore. I want to do this. Like, all my friends are business owners because that's just kind of how the world works when you're a business owner. And I was like, they all have companies. I can sell to all them. I can scale this thing. And ended up meeting with Matt that Sunday, came to an agreement, bought it, looked into the financials. We were good. It wasn't making money, but it wasn't losing money. And I was like, I can scale this crazy.
It was breaking even.
It was going back to sales.
Yep.
And that's what I want to do. And so I took that over, and we are on year 3, and learned very quickly. Well, I went overboard. I hired a sales team. I bought all new equipment, office manager. So we basically went from 3 employees to 12.
Too fast and too much.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. But I didn't care because I believed in it. But then I realized after probably year 1.5, we just had a horrible winter last year, and I was like, uh-oh. I'm like, I can't do this again. In the meantime, I still have the painting company. I just kept it at a minimum. 6 guys.
Yes, it's cash flowing, it's profitable, and you don't need to stress.
Correct. And I can focus on this until it takes off. And it still hasn't taken off. And so I have spent the last 3 months basically rebuilding Empire because I had to go back to that. It's not my passion. My passion is Perch, but my money is Empire.
It's almost like your mistress is Perch.
Yes.
But your wife right now is Empire. And you might want to get a divorce. You might want to separate, but you can't leave her yet.
Yeah. Yep. And like,
or him,
my wife says,
into.
She's like, when do we give up on this? We have that conversation, which is always fun for, somebody who, like, I still believe in Perch. And
I do too. I 100% believe in Perch. I mean, that's why we're doing this podcast.
It's exactly why we're doing this podcast, because I had to come up with ways that were not expensive because I don't have any money, to promote the business. And I started a local podcast. And I will tell you right now, if you are a local business, start a local podcast. You can hit me up on the website. I will show you and tell you how to do it. I did this for $200, and it was probably the best thing that we did. The problem is my name keeps getting more and more out there. My face is more and more out there. My marketing person told me that's what I had to do, but it's scary. You're my marketing person.
I know.
So, but that's the scary thing is, like when you're so close to either shutting down or making it, you don't know which way it's going to go. And I
And
already
it's
did
hard
that.
because marketing takes so much time to actually, like, people have to hear about you like 14 to 21 times
Yes.
before they call you, that when you're so close to opening or closing your doors, it feels like spending time in marketing is so fluffy. But if you never do it, you don't have leads coming in organically. It's so hard.
Mm-hmm.
It is truly hard.
So I'm doing the TikTok thing, I'm doing the podcast thing. I'm doing this podcast thing because, and anybody listening, I'm sure, if you're listening to this, you probably know, but you got to find ways because you can't I don't have $3,000 to throw at
Facebook
ads.
ads.
I don't.
Yeah.
I can't. And I've tried the outside commission only sales route. I've tried the base plus commission sales route. Like, that's my biggest struggle right now because I know that if I could devote all my time, that it would probably go better. But I need to find that superstar that's like me, who's money hungry and does not care about time. And that is my probably biggest problem right now because I know the second I find that person,
Yeah. Agreed.
it's like one client. It's just like painting. One client changed everything.
You don't need a bunch of yeses. You just need like a couple, maybe even just one.
Yeah.
And I think the thing about what I'm seeing today in entrepreneurship, and I will just fully acknowledge for anyone else who's like trying to hire a salesperson, because I do sales and so do you, founder-led sales. It is really hard to find salespeople in a world where everybody gets everything instantly and wants to just take the easy way out. And so people are so used to their creature comforts and not having to get outside of their comfort zone. And, just before we got on this podcast, I told Chris this morning, hey, I'm going to call this company Amigos. I'm going to say the name. I'm going to call Amigos. Their social sucks. I'm going to pitch them social. We could help them with social and merch. We totally could. And so I called, I emailed, and I get an email back. Oh, we're good. Hit us up in 12 months. We'll keep you in mind. Amigos, you need our help, by the way. You just do. I'm just going to say it right here. Your social media ain't good, and you need some good merch, and you need some good brand campaigns.
Well, yeah, that's why we're a good team.
It's yes. But it's also what happens is so you get instantly rejected. And you have to take that instant rejection and go, okay, so putting you in my CRM for another year, and then I'm still thinking in my mind, all right, well, this is the truth. I'm going to go to Amigos. I'm going to order something. I'm going to make a piece of content, and I'm going to edit it. And I'm going to just send it to them and say, look, if you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. But imagine if you had this going out, getting your brand impressions, rather than what you currently have, which is static content that's doing nothing but maybe 3 to 5 likes.
Yeah.
And to be, I think, in good sales, you got to be willing to take risks, and you got to be willing to think outside the box, and you got to be willing to hear no as just not right now.
Yeah.
All the time.
If you have no sales, you should have no shame.
Alex Hormozy says it best.
Yep, that's
and
exactly
I'm like,
what
you know what? If and it's not that we don't have any sales because we both do, but I think you got to be willing to just be like, all right, you can tell me that, and then let me just show you what it looks like. And
hey, listeners, quick break. Listen, we started this podcast because we actually like talking to other business owners. Whether you're crushing it or just Googled how to fire someone without crying, we've probably been there. If you ever want to connect for merch, branding help, or just swap war stories, check out perch-merch.com or ohhelloagency.com. No pressure. We'll even do a free brand or merch audit if that's your thing. All right, back to the episode.
So when you're talking through all of this, what goes through my mind and my question to you is, you've been through like the lowest of the lows, and now you're not at the lowest of the low. You're in that, you're at the average point of an entrepreneur trying to really build something. Where do you go to get inspired and to stay creative when you are literally in the ground floor of building a business again?
Podcast.
Yeah, this is definitely one way.
Podcast and weirdly enough, TikTok, because you can train your TikTok algorithm to it's full of Alex Hormozy.
I love him.
TikTok.
Him and Layla are my faves.
And then all of a sudden I've gone through like this spiritual awakening, and all of a sudden like God's a big part of my life again. And that hasn't happened in a long time. And then all of a sudden my TikTok is either like sales stuff, motivation stuff, or God stuff. Like it used to be weird cat videos, and people getting hit in the nuts. And it's like
God's a big part of the faith. You got to keep the faith. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And so I've been talking to him a lot. But I think that's okay. Like, it's making me aware of things now. Like, I'm not ready to give up on Perch. It's so much fun. I would not have this podcast. I wouldn't be talking to other people or meeting the people that I am or anything without Perch. Nobody's doing that running a painting company. No offense, you know.
You're getting high off of the paint, but you aren't talking to people.
You're running a daycare of, you know, blue collar workers and clientele are different than like what business owners, what we are dealing with our clientele.
For sure.
But yeah, like and you know how close I am to that. Yes, that I need. Like we have a ton of little
You have a
clients,
pipeline, yeah.
you know, and it's just a matter of getting the whale. Everybody needs their one whale.
Or a couple.
Yes, I would take a couple, but just one for now to just relieve some stress, and then I can really go after the other ones myself.
Yeah. I think the piece about your story that I also get really inspired by is the fact that you, like me, seem to get over things very quickly. Like, you got screwed with a painting situation. This guy owes you a lot of money. He owed you $250,000. Then he owes you $55,000. And instead of like sitting here and whining and complaining, you could be talking about that. Honestly, you've never told me that story one-on-one.
No.
And I talk to you all the time. The thing about it, because I went through something very similar at Oh Hello, is you could sit here and whine about it and victimize yourself and make it all about you. Or you could ask yourself, what did I contribute? What did I learn? And how am I going to go make a change and make more money?
Yeah. This is not something you want to, I don't like talking about it because I feel like you're dumb once and then you were dumb again. You know, it's like, but I believed in people. When somebody's in front of me, I am a people person, and I like to think that I have this intuition about people. And when somebody's sitting there in front of you telling you they know that they were wrong and they know they messed up, you're like, I want people to succeed. That's part of this podcast is too. I love helping other business owners, and that I thought I was helping him.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And I think one of the things that I struggle with, and maybe you'll get where I'm coming from, is I do things very emotionally intuitively because I'm a people person. I'm a relationship person. I've been in sales. But when it comes down to making business decisions, I've realized you have to have your intuition and your gut check, but then you also just have to paper things up properly. Don't take shortcuts. Have the lawyer, if it's a big enough client, have the lawyer read the contract before you sign it and tell you the implications and tell you what you should be adding and taking away. The biggest mistakes I've made in my career have been all avoidable, and it's all been because I've taken shortcuts because I've been too busy to do things the right way, to not get the right insurance, to not look at the contract the proper way. And to be honest, because I'm such a people person and such a people pleaser, sometimes I haven't pushed for the key information I need to make a decision. So for instance, I went into hired an individual who was part of my leadership team a number of years ago, and I'm not going to say what role they were in, but I hired them in and they had told me all these things that they had done. And instead of fact checking and verifying and asking for financial documents that prove that they'd done those things before I gave away a percentage of the company, I didn't because I felt intimidated by them. And I let my emotions actually rule over my gut feeling that was telling me that something was slightly off and to fact check because I felt intimidated and I wanted to take a shortcut. I wanted to get them in. I wanted to start making money together. And so it was almost like my emotions were playing against me while also screwing me over because I was so scared to stand up for myself. And I've had three or four, maybe 5 business scenarios now where I have been very scared to stand up for myself, even though I look like the strongest person because I am a people pleaser and I want someone to really like me. And that comes from all sorts of childhood trauma we could get into. Yep. And I think at this point in my career, like, and what I'm hearing from you in this story is like, you've got to always trust and verify. And so if somebody says, hey, I'm going to pay you net 30, the second you don't get that payment on net 30, you say you have that in your contract, it's pause. Hey, we can start this work when payment's back. But I too have made the mistake of saying, well, I have such a good relationship with this person. I like them so much and we're doing great work together. I'm just going to keep going. And every time I've done that, it has screwed me over in one way or another. Because people that take advantage of you are taking advantage of you because they can, because we let them.
Yeah. And I was warned, but I didn't listen.
My best friend has warned me about 2 business decisions that I made that were not great for the business. And she said, do not do that.
Yeah.
Somebody on my board of advisors for Oh Hello told me on another business that I've told you the story that the guy committed suicide from that business.
Yeah, we'll get into that in your episode.
Yeah, that's a wild Netflix story, and I'm going to name the company and everything because it's all over the internet, people.
It's out now?
It's out. But all the point being is the CEO of a $3 billion company who joined my board 5 years ago to help me get to an acquisition. I'm going to keep his name private, but he told me, took me to coffee and said, Natalie, do not do this deal. And I said, I was so in love with the deal and so enamored with the money I was going to make and what my future was going to look like when I did this deal that I just did not listen. And so I think for both of us, it's how do we learn from these situations? And you've learned so much that I don't think you'll ever be screwed like that again, because you will A, listen to people, and B, trust but verify.
Yeah, no, and it was a hard lesson learned, but yes, and it's weird because I'm still bitter, and it does come out with other clients.
Like it maybe trigger PTSD. Like, okay, you're saying you need to push your invoice. What does that mean?
I'm like, nope. I am on top of everything now, more so than I ever was, which is both good and bad. Like, I've always been a numbers guy, but not like daily. Like,
well, you could go
paying close attention to every cent, everything, every charge, and then I'm saying, okay, where are you at on payments? It's been 29 days. Tomorrow's 30. I just want you to know that, like, I'll come get it. I'm not messing around anymore. Like, I will not put myself in that situation again. Again. And it was like that even for Perch merch, though. I mean, I learned lessons there because going, to a different sort of business environment. But it's the same way. The bigger ones seem to not want to pay their bills. And, I have bills that I just finally collected from a year ago for apparel for a very large company. And I'm calling them and I'm emailing them. It's like, I'm not giving up. This is not how this is going to work. And finally I got a hold of somebody and they paid it that day online.
Well, what's crazy is cash acceleration cycle. And just a little tip for you guys, because I'm sure you already know this because you do, but I went into an EO accelerator before Oh Hello was acquired, and Greg Crabtree came in, and he leads a financial advisory firm, and he's a consultant, and he talked about these different levers to pull to get your cash up. And before then, I had been kind of just, honestly, I was paying invoices when they came in. My operations director was paying invoices when they came in. He was in the Philippines, great dude. And then we weren't being super aggressive or building the relationships with account receivables at these big companies that owed us money. So payroll would come up and it would be like, I mean, I can admit it would be like a day or two late because we hadn't been paid $25,000 from so-and-so. So Greg Crabtree talks to me and he talks to all of us in this intimate setting. And he's like, here's what you do. Number one, the first thing a private equity firm would do when they come into your business or my business is they would increase all the prices by 15%, maybe 30%. So you're undercharging. So increase your prices. Mm-hmm. And he went around the room and asked every single one of us, when's the last time you increased your price? When's the last time you increased your price? And everyone answered the same answer, like never. So we took our hourly rate from $150 an hour to $165 an hour, and no client batted an eye. Nope. Nobody asked a question. No one complained. And we also have explained to people, we haven't raised our prices in 5 years, but this is with market conditions. That was the first thing he said. Second thing he said is you build a relationship with AR, with account receivables at these big companies. You send them donuts. You make them your friends, because when a bill comes in, they get to decide who they pay first. Yep. So treat them like the queens and kings that they are. So we started building relationships with account receivables and asking, oh, Nancy, how long have you been doing this job? And really building that relationship.
Okay, love it. And that makes so much sense, because even as you're saying that, like, there's certain companies that I know the person who writes the checks. Mm-hmm. And even when I send an invoice, I make a little joke or dry humor thing about something, and I'll be like, hey, I'll be by tomorrow to pick that up, and it'll be in the mail in like 4 days.
Correct.
Those people are the ones that I'm like,
they don't want you stalking them all the time.
The ones that don't are like, 30 to 60 days and just waiting, and I don't even know who they are.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I want to wrap up your story. It's been a wonderful one. You look ahead to today, and you're scaling Perch merch, you're managing Empire Painting. How are you splitting up your time, and how are you being effective as an entrepreneur to the highest level that you can be right now?
So I'm not really splitting my time. It's just a multitask day, all day, every day.
Yeah.
But, me and my wife just opened up another location for her business. So it's just starting, so it's not bringing in the cash flow. So we've basically, and thank God my wife's an entrepreneur and gets it, and we're going through it together, which is good and bad, but it's like we're just going to put our heads down and we're going to work 7 days a week.
Hell yeah.
Like that's what we're doing. And we hope in 6 months that we can breathe and that everything is good again. And
You will.
We're just doing it. And it's, I mean, you know, it seems like it's rough, you know, it's rough on our marriage. It's rough on everything, but we're doing it together. And, you know, I love her more now than I ever have. It's weird, but like
I love you too, Michelle.
We're going through it, and some days are bad for her, you know, where she's like losing that motivation. And then some days are bad for me where I'm losing that motivation. But one of us, it's never both of us at the same time.
Well,
that's what matters.
I mean, my golly, I love Michelle. She's a wonderful person, and she, like you, does get it. And so you two will figure it out. By the time this podcast comes out, I will likely be married. Maybe this episode comes out a couple days before, but I get married in 2.5, 3 weeks, less than. Who's counting? My husband is an entrepreneur as well.
Yeah.
And we'll have to have him on because I just realized we need to have him on. And there are days where we come home and work, both of us, till midnight. I mean, right now, our agency was just acquired. I have big sales goals to hit. We are scaling on a global level. We are building a brand with, you know, this podcast and other avenues. There's a lot of pressure on me. I'm still really in the entrepreneurial seat right now, even though I don't own the agency anymore. And it's sales and it's high growth. And my fiance runs, you know, a large scale coffee vending and water business that serves corporations and hospitals and gas stations in the Midwest. And he has a roastery. We have a roastery that the coffee comes out and it's, you know, roasted, fresh, air roasted, huge roastery that they acquired before, because I wasn't part of it. They acquired a couple of years ago. So their business is growing insane.
Yeah.
And I think we all know, like sometimes Andrew and I talk about it. It's like sometimes we can't even plan right now past 6 weeks. We're just like, we've literally said to each other, let's just get past the next 6 weeks. And then in 6 weeks, we'll figure out this. And I think you have to just be prepared as an entrepreneur to just go through the storm and know that you're going to keep your head down, put your bandana on, put your goggles on, and try not to choke any on the sand, you know, that's coming into your mouth.
But there's no sand because we're not doing vacations or anything, but that's like first thing on my list.
You know, the buffalo, I mean, you've heard the buffalo. I didn't give the best analogy just now of choking on sand, but the buffaloes, when they see a storm, I love this analogy.
They run towards it.
They run towards the storm because they know the only way that they can get through a problem or get through the storm is if they actually go through it instead of trying to run away from it or
get through it faster.
Yeah. And I think you and I will talk next on my episode, preview to that, you know, have Oh Hello, which has been successful and been wonderful. And then, of course, I got too big for my britches 5 years in and thought, let's do another business. Let's take the focus away, and raised $500,000 for a second company that ended up turning into a Ponzi scheme. The FBI is involved now. Was the manufacturer of our product. CEO of that company took himself out on a boat in Hawaii, never found again after, you know, we're surmising potential fraudulent activity financially. We had raised $500,000, my business partner and I, for that company. I was doing it with Oh Hello. I'm not doing that company right now. And, you know, and it was a mess. And it's still a mess that we're cleaning up today. And so all that to say, everyone is going to have a storm.
You're still going through your storm, but you ran into it head first.
Yes.
Because we'll learn in your episode that didn't stop you.
Yep.
So stay tuned.
Yeah. So thank you guys for listening. Chris is, you know, he's an amazing business owner. He's an even better human. If you want to support Perch merch, I can tell you that we also now have an online store. Like, you can create your own online store where people can shop merch for your company, which is super cool. I can also tell you, if you follow Chris on TikTok, you're going to notice that he will not let you buy anything that's dumb or silly because he will tell you that's dumb or silly. So you're going to get a very good reality check of what to buy. And would love for anyone who's listening to, you know, support his business, but also just know that you're working with people that care about you. So that's it for today. Next up will be my episode, and look forward to telling you all about the craziness there.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.